Stuart at 9-1-1. He's playing the green-black.
So something that will be, I believe, problematic for Stuart in this matchup potentially is the fact that if you compare his list to something like Green-White Devotion, Green-White has a lot of insulation against sweepers. Master the Unseen does a ton of work there. His list is basically just Whisperwood Elemental as a way to protect himself from something like Crux of Fate. So I think the sweepers in this matchup are going to be a lot more potent here than it would be against something like Green-White.
All right, we're underway. Stuart Miller on the play. Starts with a turn 1 Font of Fertility as we pass back to Jessup. Jessup is on a 6-card hand this game. And Font of Fertility, basically just a rampant growth style card you see here. 1 to play, 2 mana. He can sack it to go get a basic land, but also helps add to that constellation strategy that we often see out of the green-black decks.
And what's nice about this is, as the format has moved, at least in Dallas, to a lot more copies of Wild Slash, it's nice to have an accelerator that doesn't get clipped. I mean, it's a little bit slower. It's not necessarily the best card to draw in the mid-game, but neither is Elvish Mystic. And the upshot is you don't have to worry about it getting killed.
So just second land from Jessup, and this will be the ramp spell from Stuart. He'll go straight from 2 to 4, or rather in this case, 2 to Courser of Crufix. Try to hit a free land off the top of the library, does not. Shows Whisperwood Elemental, and now plays a Swamp from hand.
So an interesting addition here. We don't see much of it, but it makes sense to me.
All right, now we're back over to Jessup. Has his third land right now, giving a lot of a look like a blue-black deck. You see him, no green mana just yet. His draw for the turn there was Satyr Wayfinder. For Stuart, he draws the Whispered Elemental for the turn. This time he hits a free land off the top of the deck. It's a basic forest, shows Eidolon of Blossoms, and now has his choice of 5 drops, both Doomwake Giant and 2 copies of Whisperwood Elemental in hand. He's got a lot of heat.
And you see that Danny kind of had to just allow Stuart to get that free land even with Downfall in hand, because that Downfall has to go towards Whisperwood Elemental or some other big play that Stuart might play this turn.
So Courser will swing in for 2. That'll put Danny down to 18. Now Whisperwood Elemental comes from Stuart. And this should get the move you were talking about. So Danny's going to go ahead and fetch for a swamp, not let this go to end step. Does not want the manifest to happen.
But so far, this is a good start for Stuart. He's accelerating, he's generating some card advantage, and he's still got more power left in his hand.
Yeah, he's got 2 more really powerful 5 drops, and he's not feeling too much pressure just yet from Danny.
Yeah.
As we'll go back over to Jessup. Can he find his green mana source? He does have that Satyr Wayfinder in hand. His draw for the turn was Dig Through Time. He doesn't have the green source, but a more problem, he doesn't have a land at all. Has to pass back, and now Stuart can compound this advantage. Draws for the turn, gets that Eidolon of Blossoms, gets a free forest off the top of the deck, shows Whip of Erebos as the next card. These are all cards that can be problems.
Find a land on the top, and then a piece of action to follow it. That's how you dial it up with Courser of Crufix.
So we see from Courser swings for 2, Danny down to 15. Eidolon played, he will draw Whip of Erebos, shows Doomwake Giant on top of the deck, and he'll pass. Danny on end step will Bioblade away the Eidolon of Blossoms.
Yeah, but this is a totally fine setup here for Stuart. He's just 2 for winning every single turn. He's attacking Danny. He's got a hand with action in it. He's drawing more stuff. You know, Whip of Erebos is a powerful leftover. This is a really solid start for Stuart thus far.
Yeah, no land still for Danny. He does draw Thoughtseize for the turn and gets to see what he's up against. Stuart's hand has 2 more lands, both Forest and the Llanowar Wastes. He has a Whip of Erebos, Doomwake Giant, and a second copy of Whisperwood Elemental all in hand.
And this feels like a spot where you kind of had to just take Whip of Erebos out of the hand because the game's going to go on for a very long time. He may need to take Whisperwood Elemental just because it's the more immediate threat, but this is a bad hand for Danny to be looking at. There's 2 cards here that have some serious long-term implications for him.
Yeah, well, if he didn't have the Whisperwood Elemental in hand, Danny could hope to take Whip and then score something like Crux of Fate to sweep up the board, but the Whisperwood Elemental makes that a lot tougher of a line for him.
And Danny, I believe, does not have Crux of Fate in hand right now, and he's still stuck on 3 lands, so he's really far away from hypothetically even being able to cast Crux of Fate.
He will take the Whip of Erebos, though. If he wants to kill spell his way through this hand, he's going to have to do it. Well, Whip would make that pretty hard for him to pull off. Stuart draws Doomwake Giant for the turn. Eidolon of Blossoms waiting on top of the deck. He's going to swing in again with Courser Danny down to 11. And these Courser hits and Thoughtseizes are starting to take a toll on Danny's life. Llanowar Wastes the play for the turn, and Stuart debating which 5 he wants to go for, Doomwake Giant and Whisperwood Elemental.
Whisperwood Elemental is more powerful in an immediate sense, but I don't know if he wants to manifest the Eidolon of Blossoms because it's so powerful for him to draw. So it looks like he's going in the other direction there and just casting the Doomwake Giant and setting himself up to be able to draw and cast Eidolon of Blossoms next turn.
He does cast Doom Make Giant. And Danny, a pretty interesting player. So he drew Temple of Malady for the turn. But were he to play it, he'd be showing that he was Sultai control instead of blue-black ops, instead of playing the dual land to just concede that game, knowing that he's probably just too far off to have it matter.
I don't know how much information concealing green is in the terms of the way that Stuart's going to sideboard, but I still think he's better served. Danny is better served by just conceding there and not revealing anything, because he's dead almost no matter what.
All right, well, we will go ahead first and look at the sideboards here for the players. We see Danny Jessup and Stuart Devotion. Walk me quickly through here. On Danny Jessup's side, what's his sideboard?
3 copies of Corsair Crewfix, 2 copies of Drowned Sorrow, 2 Farika's Cures, 2 Negates, 2 copies of Tastic or the Golden Fang, a Disdainful Stroke, an Aether Spouts, a Pearl Lake Ancient, and a Cure the Crashing Wave. I'm not really in love with any of the options that Danny has here for this matchup. I think the Drowned Sorrows are okay. I think Corsair is okay. I think Disdainful Stroke is pretty solid here. I'd be comfortable going up to 4 copies. Stuart's deck has a lot of good stuff to counter, but not a whole lot of action here on the board.
Yeah, on Stuart's side, the black spells always help him in a control matchup. He gets to board in his own copies of Thoughtseize for the matchup, as well as more cards like Whip of Erebos, and even some Planeswalkers if he wants. A lot of Nissa and Garruk in his sideboard, along with Soul of Innistrad. He can have some cards that are pretty good at trying to grind through removal.
I think Stuart's got an excellent sideboard for this matchup. 3 copies of Thoughtseize, 3 copies of Nissa, Hornet Queen, Whip of Erebos, Soul of Innistrad, even the 2 Boon Satyrs, I think, are all viable options for him to bring in. So I think Stuart gets the better of the sideboard here.
All right, well, these players are sideboarding for it. I want to talk to you a bit about the next Grand Prix we have coming up. You may have seen us at Grand Prix Miami last weekend. You and Cedric were able to cover the finals of that one. But coming up in June, that's going to be Grand Prix Charlotte. This comes in a series of Star City Grand Prix for this year. This is the next one in stateside at the very least. It's going to be Modern, June 12th through 14th. Let me tell you, there are a lot of things that are going to be happening here. First of all, we have registration rewards. This is something you come to expect from Star City Grand Prix. This means a playmat, a sleeves, a deck box, and a pin. And once again, we do have an official Magic artwork going to be featured on all of it. Now, we are going to tell you that one as it comes down the line because it is on a card not yet spoiled in the Modern Master set, but it's going to be a pretty good one.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Grand Prix New Jersey and everything we did for Brainstorm for that event with the sleeves, deck boxes, pins, and playmats, we're going to be doing the same treatment here for a fan favorite returning in Modern Masters 2015.
Yeah, and it's not just playmats. We have guests of honor at the event. The guests of honor, Therese Nielsen and Volkan Baga, both coming back. We're really excited to welcome back Therese Nielsen, finally on the East Coast. She was here at Charlotte in 2013 at the record-breaking Grand Prix, and she's here again, artist of a lot of cards, most notably, well, Force of Will. You may have heard of that one. Volkan Baga actually going to make it to the United States. We don't usually get to see him at events. Illustrator of Siege Rhino and also Snapcaster Mage if you're more of a blue caster, which I have to say I am.
And 2 pretty iconic cards for a modern tournament. Siege Rhino and Snapcaster Mage, 2 of the defining cards of the format.
Yeah, these will not be our only artists at the event. We have an entire artists alley. We have a lot of great people. Noah Bradley, Clint Clearly, Eric Deschamps, Mark Poole, RK Post, at least in our artist alley. Get a chance to get a lot of your cards signed there. And one thing that we're doing differently for this event was we've done some other Grand Prix. We have a lot of different ways to register. And the first thing we're interested in was called the Infinite Challenge Badge.
Yeah, for people who want to play in our 4-round challenges, people who either don't do well in the main event or don't want to participate in the large main event, you have the ability to discount your entry fees if you're going to be playing in all of them. For $40, you get a 1-day badge, which allows you to play in all the challenges with a side event voucher for a win-a-box or an 8-person draft. For $100, you get the 3-day badge, which allows you to play in all the events, gets the Grand Prix playmat, and 2 side event vouchers.
Yeah, and I like the Infinite Challenge Badge. It gets you a chance to play lots of different tournaments and formats. These are 4-round events of lots of different formats. And if you still want to get the GP playmat, you do have that option. Now, for people who want to play the main event, there's a lot of different registration you can do as well. You can customize your Grand Prix experience with lots of different levels of registration. All the way from just entering, you can get a playmat and a month's worth of Star City Premium, something that you know we do at our Star City Games events, all the way up to we're giving away things like SCG trading cards, side event vouchers. Say if you are interested in these side events while wanting to still play the Grand Prix, packs of sleeves to go with it, as well as a year's worth of Star City Premium. You see bronze, silver, gold, and VIP, all different ways for you to play the tournament that you want to play.
And the VIP lounge is going to be particularly valuable for a tournament of this size. I think that Grand Prix Charlotte is going to get north of 4,000 players, and being able to get custom pairings and your own space to hang out, very valuable for an event of that size.
Yeah, more details to come at this exciting event June 12th through 14th. This is Grand Prix Charlotte. You can pre-register today. Registration already going on at starcitygames.com/GP Charlotte. All right, and with that, we're going to be underway. Danny Jessup down a game to Stuart Miller here. He's on Siltai controls. We start the second game. Temple of Deceit is the first play for Danny as he will scry to the bottom. For Stuart, he starts on a forest. No accelerant just yet. And Danny looking to not have mana problems at all this game. Pair of temples along with Opulent Palace.
And it looks like Stuart has mulliganed and kept a one-lander and has not drawn land number 2.
Yeah, and that can actually be a very risky thing against a deck like a blue-black control deck or a Sultai control deck. This can be very dangerous for this exact reason.
Yeah, your mana acceleration is not necessarily safe against them. If it was something like Sylvan Caryatid, it's a very different story. But your mana creatures that can be targeted are very likely to be targeted and killed.
Voyaging Slayer taken down by Bioblight, and Stuart missing lands. And you see Danny, he is thrilled to be playing this kind of game. He's just playing all the way up to 5 lands. Only spell cast so far was Bioblight. Stuart finally does hit land 3. It's going to be Courser of Krufix, but will it survive? Can't imagine it will. And well, it is cut down.
If you look right now, Danny has no source of card advantage. Now, Ashiok's a great draw for Danny this turn to give him something to do, but the rest of his hand is just removal. Stuart may have the time to draw out of this, though Ashiok puts him under quite a bit of pressure.
Yeah, the Ashiok goes up to 5. It hits 2 creatures, Doomwake Giant and Courser of Krufix. Courser of Krufix is one of those cards that is a prime card for Ashiok to hit. It can up, steal it, and still live to talk about it.
And Danny kind of wants to play the card advantage and blocking game anyway, so okay.
Yeah, Danny, another Courser of his own, doesn't see the land, and he has no desire to see a Courser on... Stuart doesn't want to see a Courser on Danny's side of the battlefield, and he'll go ahead and just go to game 3.
We are seeing some quick concessions today. People are not messing around with conceding.
Yeah, no, this is something we actually see from some of our veteran players as well. I know, for example, Brad Nelson is a player definitely from this school who wants to get through the games that aren't competitive so that he has all the time that he needs to play the games that he feels like he can win.
And to that effect, he was one of the top players at Grand Prix Miami playing that green-white devotion deck who got no draws in the Swiss rounds.
Yeah, that is assessment. I cannot remember the last time I've seen Brad draw a match.
Yeah, he just is willing to give up on the hopeless games to maximize the amount of time. Now, with 38 minutes on the clock, Stuart's probably not at risk of running up against it, but Danny might make that game go on for a very, very long time.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said here. So not only is it do you want to have that time to win game 3, but sometimes if you're playing a deck like a devotion deck that can really grind out over the course of a tournament, finishing a round before it goes to time is also in your advantage as a competitor. If this is playing out all those 1% lines can really tax you over the course of a tournament.
Right. I think there is, only so much kind of mental bandwidth you have over the course of a 2-day tournament. I definitely started feeling it more and more once I got into my late 20s and early 30s, which is relatively old for a competitive Magic player, of 2-day, 15-round events with the top 8. They're exhausting. And if you're sitting there banging your head against the wall, trying to win a completely hopeless game, well, that might cost you when you lack the mental acuity and focus to grind through a close match that's complicated.
Then again, you can just always play red decks that hope the game never goes past turn 6, and you just don't have this problem.
Sure, that is a way to hedge as well, but there is still only a finite amount of bandwidth. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly, I know when I play decks like the Sphinx's Revelation blue-white deck from last season, you really could run into the problem that you'd be playing all 50 minutes every round.
And there's no way to win short with that deck either. It
didn't do that. I mean, the way to win short was you had to do very demoralizing things and hope that your opponent would concede because he wasn't having fun.
Right.
That was your out for winning in under 20 minutes. You said, well, maybe if I just Sphinx's Revelation and then just show him 3 dissolves in my hand, maybe he'll just lose his will to keep playing. Which, yeah, it's magic right there.
Right, but you had to hope that your opponent cooperates there.
Right, no, some people just, they're like, well, maybe you'll draw lands, and maybe you will. Not 100%. Yeah, but so far, 2 games that really have been defined by one player missing their first land drop. This is actually a matchup where I would think that, especially on Stuart's side, I think he can afford to miss a land drop and recover from it. Danny doesn't punish players too hard for that. I mean, Ashiok does, but the Levas deck doesn't.
Yeah, there is time to draw out. And you saw there that game, when Danny drew Ashiok, then it became very different. But initially, his hand was just removal. He had no dig-through time. He had no proactive plays. And that's kind of bad news for Stuart. But he had a hand of a bunch of spells against Danny having 3 or 4 removal spells. Not impossible for Stuart to slog through it and eventually stick some big threat.
All right, we go to game 3. Stuart back on the play. with green-black devotion. And this is another flavor of devotion we have seen. We've seen mostly the green-red and green-white devotion decks. They've been the two most popular insofar as that they're really just mono green with a light splash. What I like about the black version is that this is much more of a two-color deck, and almost times it's like a constellation deck. It has way more synergy to it.
Exactly, and you get access to Doomweight Giant, which is great against the Jeskai decks, particularly the token builds.
Stuart on a 6-card hand on the play. We'll see if he can keep here. Looks like he can. And with that, we are underway. Game 3 is between Stuart Miller and Danny Jessup. Temple of Maladives for both players to start off the game. And pressure's going to be on Stuart to make a play. He does have one of his great cards in the game match, though. This Farika, God of Affliction, in his hand. And it looks like, I can't imagine Danny will let him keep that. He thought sees is fired off, and he gets to see Stuart's hand. Stuart has land number 3. 2 3-drops in Boonsater and Farika, a 5 in Doomweight Giant, and then, well, a very late game Hornet Queen at 7.
And this deck's not very good at removing gods from the table. It is a bit of a hole for the Sultai control deck.
Yeah, I mean, once they're on the table, it's Ugin or bust, I believe.
Pretty much, yep.
With that in mind, can you see Danny taking anything other than Farika?
If he has no removal spell, maybe he has to take Boonsater.
And yeah, he does take Boonsater here. And he'll go ahead and play Llanowar Waste. So that is actually, that's a small victory for Stuart, I would think.
Well, it could be also that Danny is trying to set up Ashiok for the 3rd turn, and Boonsater is problematic for casting Ashiok.
Sure, he can ignore the Farika for a while. But Boonsater, if he doesn't have the kill spell, is a much bigger threat.
Yep.
Yeah, Stuart's hand is weak to an Ashiok right now.
So it's one of the two things, if I had to guess. Either Danny's hand is quite slow, or he has Ashiok and he's trying to open up a path for it to stay in play for several turns.
And that is the play, though, Farika for Stuart. And just as you mentioned, that was the line for Danny. He's going to go for turn 3 Ashiok. That'll hit 3 creatures. It does hit a pair of 5s, Whisperwood Elemental and Doomwake Giant. And we'll see where Danny goes with this. He can cash it immediately for something like a Whisperwood, which is a pretty tempting play. At the same time, Danny may just want to really go deep with the Ashiok and control the board.
I would have a really tough time saying no to Whisperwood Elemental against an opponent with no removal spells.
Yeah, 4th land from Stuart and no plays. He does represent the ability to play that, to make a snake off his own Boonsater. And we'll see where Danny goes. Okay. And yeah, this Ashiok, he has big plans for it. Pluses again, hitting this time Courser of Krufix and Pelucranos.
Now the upshot of doing it this way is that he can go up to 7. Stuart presumably makes a token here. Attacks Ashiok down to 6, and then Danny has the option of still getting Whisperwood Elemental and leaving the Ashiok in play.
Right, he gets to keep it and have the creature. So he's actually, now he has a decision to make. Of course, Krufix, also excellent in his deck. Satyr Wayfinder, the play for Danny. Had these in his hand game 1, but no green mana. See Mills here, gets 1 land, it's Opulent Palace, and puts creatures in his graveyard.
The Satyr Wayfinder also makes it a lot more attractive for Danny to spend 1 turn just dialing up Ashiok and getting ready to block, because he already has something equipped to trade with the token.
It takes the Palace, but then plays a green-black Temple. And now going Stuart's on step, he will exile the Boonsater. That will make a snake token with Death Touch. Eidolon of Blossoms, the draw for Stuart. But as Danny knows, here's land 5 from Stuart, and there is a Doomwake Giant in Stuart's hand. He can get rid of this blocker.
Although that still only opens up an attack for Ashiok to go down to 6, meaning that Danny still has access to the line of getting Whisperwood Elemental and keeping Ashiok in play.
One way that we can get out, that Stuart can get out of this, is he does have the combo right now of Farika plus that Eidolon of Blossoms he just picked up. And those two can really recover a lot of cards.
Well, the problem is he still needs creatures and then for them to die. So it requires some cooperation.
We're not there yet, but it's a shot. And Danny, see, not wanting to cash that Ashiok, he's just going to continue milling with it, pumps it up to 8 and gets that Courser. Speaks to the fact that Danny likely has kill spells in his hand.
Right. It adds to Danny having some intent on using Hero's Downfall or a similar effect to get rid of the Doomwake Giant.
And both creatures are going to swing at Ashiok. This should force Danny's hand. He played Polluted Delta for the turn. Urborg plans Stuart's side, so Delta does not have to be cracked as a fetch land just yet. Danny does have a Hero's Downfall. I don't know if he has more removal. I believe he has a Dig Through Time as well.
And he can downfall and dig this turn if he's feeling so inclined. But the problem with this line of play is if Stuart has found Eidolon of Blossoms, as you mentioned before, he can start doing the Pharika Eidolon thing. Draw a card this turn. If he draws a land, well, that allows him to make a snake this turn and draw another card.
Danny's going to fetch for that second blue. This will set up something like Dig Through Time. And he's going to actually dig before using Hero's Downfall. Maybe he wants, if he finds a card like Sultai Charm, he would rather use that on Doomwake Giant.
Sure.
It is an enchantment and monocolored.
Gets Corsair Krufix both ways.
Gets,
Eidolon of Blossoms both ways.
it's a good card in this matchup.
Yeah, Disenchant's very good, and kill a monocolored creature also very good. And if somehow Stuart doesn't cooperate, well, you can always catalog.
Danny taking 2 off Dig now is going to decide the kill spell that he wants. It looks like he's picked up a Crux of Fate off that play.
And with Crux of Fate now, I think Danny might just say,
it, yeah.
okay, that's fine. I'll take the big hit, save the downfall for something else.
Yep, suspicious line there, I would think, to not have a kill spell. But Stuart will post-combat play the Eidolon of Blossoms, draw a card off it. He'll play a land. And this should force Danny's hand on Crux of Fate.
But he does get the Eidolon off the table and not allow Stuart to go crazy with Eidolon and Pharika.
Yeah, the no creatures in the graveyard means that Stuart will not draw any other cards there. Draw from Danny was another copy of Dig Through Time. 5 lands in play, 6th one in hand, 7th in hand, Dig Through Time. This is a great setup for Danny.
And you get the sense that it's going to be hard for Stuart to get this Ashiok off the table. It might just be in play for forever.
And I really like the way Danny has played this Ashiok. There's a lot of points where he could have used its minus ability to put a number of decent creatures in play, but Danny has really showed some discipline in just plushing the Ashiok and protecting it. And by doing that, he's forced Stuart to just continue to attack the Ashiok. And really, Ashiok's been just a big life gain spell this game.
And there's a lot of flexibility, too. You know, Danny is playing with green mana. If Stuart ever develops a board, he has the option of doing something like getting Pelucranos and fighting with it. Or getting Whisperwood Elemental and starting to generate some tokens whenever the board's stable.
And not even Crux of Fading yet. Danny pluses the Ashiok and passes the turn. Hero's Downfall in his hand. Bile Blight as well. Stuart is going to play Font of Fertility. This should force some action. I don't think Danny wants Eidolon of Blossoms to trigger.
Yeah, I mean, if he's planning on using a kill spell this turn anyway.
Oh, wow. He's gonna let him have the card. And Whip of Erebos from Stuart. Does Danny let him have another card?
Danny's hand must be really loaded for him to be able to play this sort of game plan.
Yeah, just to let Stuart draw cards. Wanting Stuart to commit more to the board. And yeah, Stuart draws another copy of Eidolon of Blossoms. Plays land, and here comes the attack. This one's going to try to take down the Ashiok. Thanks to those 2 enchantments Stuart just played, Pharika has been activated. She's now a 5/5. Or 5, yeah. Hero's Downfall and Bile Blight. Danny will let his Ashiok get removed. This is some pretty... I like this kind of line.
Well, it's problematic now with the whip in play unless Danny has a Sultai Charm and can get it off the table.
I believe he does. So
okay.
I think it seems like he's just baiting Stuart into committing very heavily to the board.
Well, that turn, Stuart got to commit to the board, but not really, because he's not adding creatures and he's drawing cards the whole way through.
Right.
So Danny tried to set a bit of a trap that turn, but Stuart got the best of it by just doing some stuff and drawing some cards.
And so the price there is that means Danny loses his Ashiok.
I mean, Danny's got a Crux of Fate, a Downfall, another Dig Through Time. He's not at a loss. He doesn't need the Ashiok necessarily.
And he's going to go digging on end step again. Can't imagine what he's looking for. Maybe he's building up toward Ugin. That's certainly going to be a clean answer to all of this.
Although I don't know if he wants to get, rocked for another big hit next turn. He might have to do something.
Yeah, Garruk Apex Predator is a finisher in among the cards here, but very quickly takes Sultai Charm off this dig and looks like takes a second Crux of Fate. He has the option between a second Crux of Fate and another dig. And though he's taking a lot of damage and Stuart's answering things, Danny's still well in control of this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken Stuart a while to get something going here. And in the meantime, Danny's got to draw a lot of cards.
Yep, he's going to get another dig through time and that Sultai Charm off the dig. And we will continue on. Danny drawing a copy of Garruk. Opulent Palace in hand, so he does have land 7. That one's going to come into play tapped. And he'll pass. Font of Fertility cracked by Stuart. That will go ahead and get a land. And still hanging on to cards like Crux of Fate.
Yeah, this is a lot of patience being displayed here.
Well, his life total hasn't been threatened yet. Stuart, though, is drawing cards with each of these threats. I don't know. We'll see where Danny goes.
Well, Danny's got a bunch of trumps in his hand. Stuart's drawn a couple cards here, but it could all just be stuff that gets wrapped up by Garruk after there's a Crux of Fate or something like Ugin sweeping everything.
Voyaging Satyr scryed to the bottom. I guess Danny does know that there is a Hornet Queen in Stuart's hand.
Yep.
So they have to make sure that gets played around. And Stuart will make Hornet Queen. This is setting up to be a pretty good sweeper for Danny. If he can take damage for a turn, he can Sultai Charm the Whip, then Crux of Fate.
Yep.
Stuart playing the Hornet Queen pre-combat so that Danny has a much more difficult time removing Devotion to Pharika.
The problem here is that, Stuart will have the Pharika to rebuild with unless Danny gets to something like Ugin.
Here's the swing. We'll see just what Danny wants to do with it. Stuart already had a large life total thanks to that last turn's hit of Whip of Erebos. Going to go higher this turn. Sultai Charm will take care of Whip of Erebos. But thanks to Hornet Queen, Pharika's still a creature. Does Danny have another kill spell? I believe he has one. We'll see whether he casts it. Right now, it looks like he will take 12 damage. That would put him to 4 if he doesn't play anything.
And it's rough to go down that low because Stuart's going to have the ability to make creatures at instant speed. So
right.
It's not just like he can go down to 1 and he's safe. The Pharika makes it a little more complicated than that.
So he's going to Bioblade away the Eidolon of Blossoms. That makes the Pharika no longer a creature, so Danny only takes 5 there. But he did take 1 damage, I believe. Well, no, there's an Urborg in place, so he didn't have to take the damage to cast the Bioblade, so he's at 11. Now does also have a Disdainful Stroke in hand. And I believe it is time for a sweeper. At this point, I should just stop saying that one.
Right, I've been saying that for a while now, so I don't want to jump to any conclusions here.
All right, well, here it is. Crux of Fate takes care of all the creatures, leaving the board empty save for Pharika. And if you look at Danny's hand, he's got a Dig Through Time, a Disdainful Stroke, a Garruk, and 1 black card, and a black kill spell.
And more importantly, he's at a healthy life total.
Eidolon of Blossoms is going to be the start here for Danny. He can Disdainful Stroke it, or he can just downfall it after it draws. Though he probably has to Disdainful Stroke it because if he lets this hit the table, then Stuart can immediately start activating Pharika and drawing lots of cards.
Right, he can pass, and then Danny has to make a move, and in response, he can start generating tokens and draw a bunch of cards.
Danny comes to the same conclusion. He Disdainful Strokes. And that's the draw he was looking for. That's a copy of Ugin. 8 mana on the board. Danny's going to go for the other Planeswalker first. It's going to be Garruk Apex Predator.
Yeah, he can right now just start cranking out 3/3s, bleed out some of Stuart's graveyard as a result, and then Ugin away everything.
So 3/3 Death Touch Beast is made. Garruk goes up to 6. Passes to Stuart on unstep. He's going to go ahead and make 2 snakes. But Garruk very loyal, and right now Stuart in no position to remove it.
Yep. And this is good enough in this spot where it bleeds a downfall out of Stuart's hand, rather, if he has it, and then Ugin is free to run wild.
Doomwake Giant, the draw for Stuart. Both Death Touch snakes will go ahead and swing at Garruk. See if Danny wants to do anything about that. And yeah, he'll go ahead. He'll trade a beast with a snake. Garruk will take 1. He'll go back down to 5. And it looks like going to be Doomwake Giant from Stuart Miller. And he'll pass back over to Danny. Draw was a land. Still has another dig through time, though, to find more answers. That's should be pretty important here.
Yep, and he also has the option at this point. He could just Ugin for 5, clean the board, make a beast, and say go. But I think he also might be able to just extract more out of Stuart and make sure Ugin is a firm lock.
I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to go ahead and make another Death Touch Beast and just pass. Force Stuart to commit resources to killing Garruk and these tokens. Font of Fertility for Miller. That will shrink the beast. And 2 creatures in the graveyard. Okay, Stuart's going to try to kill the beast before combat.
That can allow him to get Garruk down to 1 loyalty on the board.
It does do that. Here comes the swing of 5, trying to get Garruk down to 1. And that may force Danny's hand on the hero's downfall. We'll see here. Whether he probably wants to save some damage on the Garruk.
I think this is basically this is the remainder of Stuart's graveyard, at which point I think Danny can allow Garruk go down to 1, now deploy the Ugin,
Sure.
clean up everything, and allow Garruk and Ugin to lock the game up.
We see Voyaging Satyr post-combat from Stuart, and this will be Dig Through Time from Danny Jessup. 7 more cards, he'll get to keep 2. Stuart just out of resources at this point, no cards in hand. No creatures left in graveyard. Still has a Freaka in play, but this Ugin should be able to clean up everything.
And Danny got to take, I believe, a Dig Through Time and a Murderous Cut. Nice set of cards to have here.
Yeah, his last copy of Dig Through Time, and then an unconditional kill spell. Pretty good. He'll scry to the bottom with his Temple. And here's 8 mana. That should be the Dragon Planeswalker. There you have it, yeah. Ugin the Spirit Dragon come into play. Now he can't, each permanent with converted mana cost X or less are exiled. That'll take care of Freaka. That'll take care of everything. So -5. That'll put Ugin down to 2. Garruk up to 2, makes another beast, and now we get to untap. Danny with 2 Planeswalkers in play, Stuart with no creatures in play, no cards in hand. This should be Jessup's game.
Yep. And a lot of powerful leftovers in Danny's hand here. Dig Through Time, Hero's Downfall, Murderous Cut, and just picked up a Disdainful Stroke.
Ugin deals 3 upstairs, Stuart down to 28, and Stuart should close out quickly toward the end of the game, swings to put Stuart to 25.
Danny executed such a patient game plan this game. There's a couple spots where I thought, maybe he should be making Whisperwood. This seems like a good spot for Crux of Fate, but he wanted to make sure that he got everything out of Stuart's hand before going and setting up all of his powerful cards.
Yeah, and there you have it. So in 3 games, Danny Jessup defeats Stuart Miller and defeats one of our Devotion decks. And for 2 rounds in a row, we see Jessup and Jim Davis showing some cracks in the armor of the Devotion.
And I think that the green-black deck, the vulnerability we discussed at the beginning of the match, not having a lot of great answers to sweepers was definitely on display. Crux of Fate and Ugin there in Game 3 was just too much to overcome.